Glory to Jesus Christ.
Glory forever.
Brothers and sisters, are we familiar with the term parasocial relationship? If we're not, I can do a little crash course for you. My Psych 101 is going to come into play here. It's sort of a term that's been coming up more recently in social discourse, but it's actually a term that was coined sometime in the 1950s by, I believe, a sociologist. This idea of a parasocial relationship, para from the Greek meaning beside or alongside or perhaps near, and then a social relationship. And really what that is speaking to is this idea that in the 1950s, the sociologist was acknowledging this sort of phenomenon he was seeing where people were able to cultivate what they felt were very real and tangible relationships with people like celebrities or figures of power. But really, when it came down to it, they didn't actually have a real tangible connection or knowledge of that person. You know, when I say I know a celebrity, what I really mean is I know of them, I know about them. I don't actually know them or know who they are, their interior lives. You know, I had a parasocial relationship when I was in college. I don't know what people were doing in college. I was commuting to college. I was keeping my nose in the books. One thing that I did was that I had found this YouTube channel where these two guys were really passionate about discussing films, like old movies often, not really new releases. But they had like such incredible chemistry with each other. They were very funny. Very much clear to me, clearly had a great affection for one another, and it made it very fun. So it was every week. I would go and I would check in every week, and they'd be talking about some new movie I'd never watched or ever heard of, and yet for some reason I was watching them talk about it for like 20 minutes. And it was really quite something, and this became a very regular part of my life. It started in college, but it actually continued even into my marriage. They were still going. They were still trucking along, and so my wife actually remembers what I'm going to be talking about today, because there was one day when I tuned in, everything was normal. They announced the movie, and then they said, by the way, this is Craig's last episode. Craig is done after this episode. And I was like, Craig, no. Oh, Craig, what happened? What happened to Craig? And I was immediately just shocked that the series was coming to an end. And it really bugged me. It really bothered me. I think Sophie can attest that I was really torn up about it, actually, in almost an embarrassing level. Just sort of like just unconsolable. I was like, oh, these guys, what happened to Craig? And I think after further reflection, what I was really wrestling with was two deaths in that news. One, of course, that some media that I enjoyed was ending, and that's hard. We all love art and those things, and it's sad when those things end. But I was also coming to reckon with another little kind of death, this acknowledgement and this understanding that at the end of the day, these two guys, I didn't know them at all. I didn't know them. I thought I had cultivated a relationship with them, and with that I had cultivated a level of affection and what I thought was knowledge of them and their friendship. But at the end of the day, they went their separate ways. It seemed pretty amicable, but it was over, and they weren't friends anymore. And so it was a revelation to me that as much time and investment as I had spent with these people, I had not yet crossed the barrier, the threshold of actually coming to know them, of actually cultivating knowledge in those people. And so it's really tricky, these parasocial relationships that we have with figures in our lives. And I want to be a little bold here, is that I think it's very easy for us, brothers and sisters, to cultivate a somewhat parasocial relationship with Jesus. It's possible. And I know it's possible because we see it in the gospel today. We see the disciples who have been sent out by Christ to minister to people, and they're faced with having to cast a demon out of a little boy, and they're incredibly, embarrassingly unsuccessful. And now these disciples would say that they know Jesus. They definitely know a lot about him. They know enough to follow him. Some of them are even smart enough to correctly identify some really important facts about him, like Peter, who at this point has acknowledged that Christ is the Messiah, the Son of God, right? They know a lot about him. They know him to be wise. They listen to his teachings. They're not always good at following them, and we'll get into that. And yet, even knowing him and walking alongside him and being near to him, when push comes to shove, when there's an opportunity for them to actually incorporate all the things that Christ has taught them and to express and show their real knowledge of Christ, they're unsuccessful. They're not able to actually implement his words and teachings into themselves and express those things as healing towards other people. And this is a really humbling thing for them. Because when it comes to this participation in ministry, in his ministry, Christ says so himself in this gospel. Why weren't they able to do this? Because they lacked faith. And brothers and sisters, let's remember that faith is not just some sort of blind belief in something that we don't know or understand. What we teach and what we know to be true is that faith is really a cultivation of knowledge and trust in God. It's a cultivation of a relationship with him, a practical relationship, a pragmatic relationship, one that involves an interior knowledge of ourselves and also paradoxically, almost impossibly, more than almost impossibly, further knowledge and understanding of an unknowable and ineffable and inexpressible God. If we don't do that, if we don't come to know God, if we don't actually come to know his wisdom and his teachings, well, we're going to be left kind of hung out to dry when push does come to shove, and when we're facing the temptations and the demonic forces and the evils of this world, just as we saw with the disciples today. And so it can leave us with some pause in this moment. But I want to give us some comfort, because unlike some social media influencer on Instagram or whatever your poison of choice is, Jesus Christ came and broke down any possible barriers that would keep us from actually coming to know him. And he says this at the end of the gospel. When he speaks to the disciples, he talks about how the Son of Man will be lifted up and will die for mankind and will raise again. And what he's describing there is the mechanism, the very process by which knowledge of God is now possible. In the mystery of the crucifixion, Jesus Christ makes himself known to us more intimately than any other possible way that we could know God. But as a starting place, he says it too. Remember, Jesus is not like coy when he's telling us, how do I come to know you? How do I cultivate a relationship with you? What does he say? What does he say in the gospel today? What is the only way that we can drive out this spirit of demonic forces? There's two things. Prayer and fasting. Aha, I tricked you. We're talking about prayer and fasting again. This is not to be a broken record about this, but Jesus is explicit. He says, how do you come to know me? How do you cultivate a spirit of understanding and wisdom? How do you incorporate the things I'm teaching you so that you can actually go out and being a healing presence to others, to yourself, to drive off demonic forces, to wield the power that Christ is offering you? He gives us two very simple things: prayer and fasting. And that's because these things are very specifically cultivating our spirit of faith in Christ. And what I mean by that is this: look to prayer. Prayer is, we think of prayer and fasting so often as obligations, things that God just tells us to do because they're good to do. But really and truly, let's think about it for a second. Prayer is this intentional moment, at least once a day, maybe more if we can, and ultimately to the hope of doing it ceaselessly like the saints, to place our focus on Christ, to be with him. And forgive me for the tackiness of continuing with the social media metaphor. This is not like we're leaving a comment on God's Facebook page, okay? We're having a face-to-face with him in prayer. We're having an intimate interaction with him, a one-on-one, an actual communication with him. And so really this is not an obligation. This is a beautiful and profound gift that God is offering us. He is making himself available in each and every moment to speak to you. And that's why he wants you to pray all the time, so that he can reveal himself in those moments. And then likewise, fasting, which really does feel like an obligation. This fast is only 2 weeks long, and for some reason in August, it just feels like the longest fast of all time. But really and truly, fasting is this beautiful opportunity, having prayed and having received wisdom and understanding from God, we now are offered an opportunity in a very small way, a very small but very meaningful way, to participate in his ministry. And what I mean by that is when Christ has come and taken on flesh and become man for us, that entire process, his ministry, his sacrifice, all of these things are an act of self-denial, of condescension, of lowering oneself, of humility. And so, when I look in the fridge and I see my bologna in there and I want to eat it, not to make light of it, but I have these opportunities to enter into an act of self-denial too. an act of humility to say, you know what, I don't get to have that thing that I want right now. And in that tiny way, seemingly insignificant compared to what Christ does, right? But Christ isn't asking us to do exactly what he did, right? Because this morning he tells us you only need about as much as a mustard seed's worth to move a mountain. So let's start small, and let's take comfort and joy in the fact that these little things that we're doing, these simple, consistent things, are slowly but surely punching through that parasocial barrier that we have between us and an ineffable God, and bringing us into full knowledge and understanding of this God who loves us and wants us to be loved and wants us to live profitable and peaceful and loving lives. What beautiful things he's given us. These are such great gifts. The blessing of the Lord be upon all of you. Glory to Jesus Christ.